Good day. My name is Hanna Kaminski, and I am doctoral researcher, and I work as part of the Arts Equal Research Consortium at the University of the Arts Helsinki. The Arts Equal project addresses questions regarding the future of Finland's welfare society by rethinking the role that arts might play in addressing 21st century social challenges. My research focuses on how extracurricular music education can address inequality and how teachers can enhance equality in the extracurricular music education system. The topic of my presentation today focuses on an initiative in Finland's extracurricular music education system that was created as a response to social inequality. I will start this presentation by describing the Finnish social context, which is characterized by an increasing amount of inequality. I will then describe the publicly funded extracurricular arts education system called Basic Education in the Arts. The initiative I center my discussion on today is the Flora project, which has attempted to enhance the accessibility of the basic education in the arts music education system for students who have been socially and/or economically marginalized. Finally, I will apply concepts of reflection, critical reflection, and reflexivity. Just a few words about it. Finland is no doubt familiar to you as a Nordic, egalitarian, democratic welfare state. One significant foundation of Finnish democracy has been, and continues to be, Finland's education system, which strives to ensure equal opportunities for all students, regardless of their family backgrounds, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. However, researchers have recently identified an increasing gap between the rich and the poor, which is a fairly new phenomenon for the small Nordic welfare nation. Finland is increasingly segregated, with individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds facing new challenges within mainstream systems, such as public schooling and, for example, regional living standards. This polarizing situation demands new considerations and practices for Finland's egalitarian education system if it is to ensure equal opportunities for all students, regardless of their family backgrounds, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. This is also a concern for Finland's extracurricular basic education in the arts system. Whilst considerable research has explored ways to navigate inequality through compulsory schooling, little attention has been paid to how extracurricular education systems might address social inequality. The Finnish government-funded extracurricular basic education in the arts is a unique system, primarily serving children and young people. The system includes 9 different forms of art. The system is founded upon a mandate of equality where every child has the right to learn artistic skills and expression. Basic education in the arts education currently consists of almost 400 art schools that serve approximately 126,000 students. This means that 12% of all 2 to 19-year-olds within the Finnish population are studying in the basic education in the arts education system. Music education as a part of the basic education in the arts system has a significant role, with almost 100 music schools that serve approximately 67,000 students. Basic education in the arts is guided by a national core curriculum that regulates the aims and preconditions for organizers, cooperation, curriculum guidelines, student selection, evaluation, and state subsidies. The recently published National Curriculum for Basic Education in the Arts highlights the need for extracurricular arts education to attend to matters of equality in Finnish society. It is the first time for equality to be explicitly mentioned in the National Curriculum for Basic Education in the Arts. Participation to the education is voluntary, and its providers may charge moderate fees. In the field of basic education in the arts, music education, these concerns manifest in the fact who has access to arts education institutions and services. In 2016, the Helsinki Department of Culture found that neighborhoods representing a lower socioeconomic demographic also had the lowest participation rates, 2.1% in music institutions, whereas neighborhoods with more financially stable populations had the highest participation rates, 26.7%. In the latest funding decisions in 2017, the Helsinki Department of Culture cut the annual basic education in the arts music budget by 5% as a consequence for failing to enhance accessibility, equality, and diversity in institutions. Yet, considerations of how music institutions might address social inequality are not completely absent from the basic education in the arts system. I will now describe the case of Flora that has been defined as a social innovation in the Finnish extracurricular music education system. In this context, I specifically refer to the definition prepared by Lauri Väkevä, Heidi Westerlund, and Leena Ilmola. Their research in the Flora project in terms of equality in the broader basic education in the arts system has highlighted the project's potential to offer music education in a socially fair manner, while conceptualizing the explicit educational aims and ethos of equality and accessibility as a form of social investment and institutional innovation, as it suggests a new way of cooperating in the late modern society. The Flora project was established in 2014 by teachers working in basic education in the arts music schools. The aim of the Flora project was to respond to the rapidly changing Finnish society. Accessibility and equal opportunities for extracurricular education formed the starting points of the project. Cooperation with childcare, schools and charities was the way to reach children and young people in the Finnish society who were absent from music schools. Music teachers in various music institutions were the first to come up with the concept of Flora. Music institutions were then given the opportunity to Flora project music lessons in the institutions. And finally, to reach the children and young people of the project, cooperation with different social sectors was established. The official Department of Childcare, schools and charities made validations as to whom music education was offered to. These validations were based on offering music education to children from lower socio-economic backgrounds without so-called traditional musicality testification. The project initially only offered music education to children and young people registered with the Department of Child Protection in Helsinki, the capital of Finland, but it soon expanded to serve 158 students aged 5 to 20 years old, living in 10 cities around the country. Students do not pay any tuition fees, and they have had the opportunity to take instruments home for practicing. From the data that has been collected during the Flora project, a notable point is how co-operators have offered this education specifically to immigrant families with a participation rate of 57%. Teachers working in the Flora project are primarily employed on a full-time basis in basic education in the arts institutions, meaning that this work takes place within the mainstream system. Thus, the Flora project's children are not officially students in the basic education in the arts system. Funding for the project has been both public and private. Since the start of the Flora project in 2014, approximately 98% of its funding has been provided by cultural and educational stakeholders. The remaining 2% of funding has been provided by the official social department. Cooperation between various sectors, including culture, education and social sectors, to reach the children in the music education system has been a significant outcome of the project, and this leads to the fact that the project could be considered as a multi-professional cross-sector collaboration between different service systems. As such, the Flora project may serve as a model for potential solutions for problems that have not yet been adequately addressed by conventional practices within the national music education system. That's it. Sorry. On a research basis, the Flora project offers various different approach possibilities. The project has been established as the initiative of pedagogues working in music institutions, where one pedagogue sent a chain email to familiar colleagues. The email spread and reached numerous pedagogues who had similar opinions. The message of the letter was, what can music and instrumental teachers at music institutions do for the increasing social inequality among children and young people? There were a lot of replies to the letter, which indicated that it was not just an individual teacher who had made these observations. The well-functioning, existing and comprehensive Music Education Institute network has played a key role in the establishment of the project, as well as the willingness of the principals of Music Education Institutes to cooperate with teachers who initiated the process. The education institutes have offered the framework for implementing the project in cooperation with the social sector. Why was it the teachers who initiated the project? Now, Donald Chern might fit in this case. In his publication, The Reflective Practitioner, How Professionals Think in Action, he assumed that competent practitioners know more than they can say. He wrote that practitioners do reflect on their knowing in practice. When a reflective practitioner finds himself stuck in a problematic situation which cannot readily be converted into a manageable problem, he may construct a new way of setting the problem. Going further, from a reflective practitioner to a critically reflective practitioner or teacher, Stephen Brookfield's definition might also be useful in this case. For him, part of critically reflective focus is on clarifying how power relations in the outside world reproduce themselves in the classroom unless there's a deliberate attempt to stop this happening. In the Flora project, teachers and principals of education institutions aim to find a practical solution to how the basic education in the art system could respond to the society that is becoming increasingly unequal, where children and young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have been absent in the system. Going further from a reflective practitioner and a critical reflective practitioner to a critically reflexive practitioner, I will end my presentation today with Anne Cunliffe's definition of a critically reflexive practitioner. What does it mean to be reflexive? Being reflexive is about having a heart. It is not a technique, but a way of being in relation with others that brings about moral and ethical considerations. It requires us to be solicitous and respectful of differences. Being reflexive doesn't give us definitive answers to problems, but instead highlights the need to engage in critical questioning and deeper debate around issues that have been taken for granted and that have potential moral and ethical implications. Thank you for having this time.
Initiated, developed and organized a remarkably large-scale audience work that is highly ambitious both artistically and creatively. Today she will talk about artistic processes in school environment. Are there basic processes, she asks, and she will also introduce Kodiak's kinesthetic language workshops at comprehensive schools. Welcome.
Thank you, Kai.
Yeah, oli varmaan tullut.
Yeah. Okay, so couple words what's Zodiac. It's a key producer and a venue for contemporary choreographies and performances in Finland. We also have a vast outreach engagement program that is an important part of our work. Today I'm going to talk to you about one of the biggest projects we have had in Zodiac's outreach program, which looks into the possibilities of artistic process happening in a school environment. In English, we have called this project the Kinesthetic Language Workshops. In Finnish, we have named the project Talk, taidetta ja liikettä kielten opetukseen, which translates to art and movement in language learning. During this presentation, I will refer to the project as its simple name, Talk. Well, Talk was an educational project that used art and movement to facilitate language learning. In the project, 7 different dance artists worked with children in grades from 1 to 9 in different comprehensive schools in which students were learning English, Swedish, French, German, Spanish, Russian, or Finnish as a second language. In the end of the project era, we were happy to become part of the Arts Equal research initiative, as Professor Eva Anttila and postdoc researcher Hanna Nikkanen were taking part to Talk project in teachers and researchers' role. We only finished the last workshops this autumn in the August, and I am at the moment in the process of analyzing and writing the final report to the Van der Konne Foundation. The aims of the project were intentionally very instrumental. using the movement as a tool for learning. In Zodiac, we are doing like project arts for art's sake in a very, that's the normal way we are doing it. But in this one, we wanted to see what if an artist really tried to research how to use her skills and how to use movement for some specific purpose. So we wanted to test an artist's role as a developer and also investigate how movement can help in learning a language. At the same time, as the leader for the project, I encouraged each of the artists to research their own interest in language and the movement and explore the relationship between them. My original idea and intention was that each artist would develop their own unique way of working. Talk, at this point when we had the Kone Foundation funding, didn't start from the scratch, but it was preceded by earlier occasional work with the kinesthetic workshops that we have developed in Zodiac. At this point, I would like to show you a couple of videos from the project. The first one is a recording from the German language lesson, and the other one is an extract from the video guide we had made mainly to serve the needs of language teachers. Let me see if this works. I'm horrible with the technology, yes. What did I say?
Guten Tag, guten Tag, guten Tag, guten Tag. Wer bist du? Ich bin Felix, ich bin Felix. 1, 2, 3, wir sind 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10, 10, 10. Wie geht's dir? Wie geht's dir? Miserabel. Nein, prima. Really?
This was from the very beginning of their language studies. They had to learn how to say their names and how they're feeling. And then they created the rap with the teacher from the material they'd been learning. The second video is from... Sorry, I lost where I am. And the second video is from the video guide that we developed mainly for the needs of the language teachers working at schools.
Talk to talk. Talk to talk.
Se on eri selainikkunassa. Joo, no niin. Ja nyt se on täällä.
Mun pitää ottaa sieltä kohta siitä videosta.
Harjoitellaan värejä, eli mietitään ensiksi kaikki värit läpi, mitä meillä on ollut.
Elikkä haluatko alkuun?
Joo, ja sitten siihen kohtaan 3 minuuttia vähän yli. Joo, se on varmaan hyvä. Ja sitten isoksi.
Sit.
Yes, sit down. I'll start with a statua.
Statue.
But what kind of statue? What different kind of statue you gonna? Any statue. Freeze somehow. Yeah. Good. Girar la cabeza.
Roll your head.
Good. Gritar.
Scream.
Eso. Gritar. Bien. Tenemos 10 verbos. Y ahora, now I'm going to put them on the floor. around here. So you'll be moving around in space with music. I will put some music on. And then when the music stops, you can just move freely all over. And when the music stops, you stay where you are and you look at the nearest paper, nearest verb you see, and do the action. I'm going to write my phone number. ¿Lo tienen? Bien. Y ahora, cada número tiene un verbo, una acción, y son los mismos que ven aquí. Entonces, el número 0 sería saltar 2 veces. Entonces lo van a escribir ahí. So, now everybody has it? Bien. Bien. Now, you have these 10 numbers here, and you have 10 different actions, verbs, maybe some of them a couple of times. So you have a little sequence of movements now, a little choreography, so to speak. So now I will give you some time to work on your sequence. You can take space, place in the space, and work by yourself for a couple of minutes. And you do your own sequence and you try to memorize it as well as you can. The idea is that finally you can actually do this sequence without the paper, like without the notes. Okay, so now we're going to split the group in half, and the other group is going to perform this sequence. Everybody is going to do her own sequence the same time, and the other group is going to be watching, and then we're going to change. Gracias. ¿Qué vieron? What did you see? ¿Qué verbos? ¿Qué acción?
Los saltos, los vueltos.
¿Vueltas? Ajá.
Vueltas, sí.
Sí. ¿Qué más?
Gritar.
Gritar varias veces.
Sacudir las manos. Sí.
So in the second video, Annina was teaching Spanish verbs to the teenagers from the international school. I would like to point out that normally during the lessons, she would only give instructions in Spanish. But during filming, she was asked to give the instructions in English as well to help with the editing of the video. So that is why she was kind of going through there with giving the explanations in English and in Spanish. But why I wanted to show you this extract, it was quite clear example of the lesson structure that we created for the kinesthetic workshops and for the needs of learning. It was missing the physical warm-up from the beginning, but the film joined the lesson from the point where the theme of the lesson was introduced to the students, then rehearsed with movement, and then rehearsed again in the written form, and then varied with creative physical task, and then repeated once again. So this was something that we created for the teachers. Like I earlier said, my intention and expectation was that lessons led by the different artists would vary a lot from each other, but instead their work ended up fairly similar. As I now look back, the reasons for this seems quite obvious to me. The aims were giving a strict frame and a clear goal to enhance the learning. The school environment and teachers' needs were also strongly guiding the work. You have to bear in mind that I'm now talking about Finnish school system and the experiences we gathered from these 22 schools we were working with. And we had about 1,600 students working with us. And of course, there were some variation between the schools and children and teachers, but in general, the same phenomenon was recurring. What happened that we often didn't have an access to suitable space for dancing because those spaces don't exist in Finnish schools. They have gym halls, but they are used by PE teachers. So often we ended up dancing just in a normal classroom where we were pushing the tables aside on the dirty floor. And the other, kind of you were talking about the power struggle. The other thing was how we could use time. We were very often given that 45-minute frame that is the normal standard classroom timing in Finnish school, even though it was clear from us from the beginning that we would need longer time for working with the creative work. And it was also another part that we were trying to figure out, which was challenging, was to find the time for both the artists and language teachers to prepare the lessons together. And of course, there's these differences, how you think that the lessons are planned. Another one would like to move and be in a studio, and the other one wants to be behind the desk and write it down and have everything very clearly decided what's going to happen before the lesson. So there we are coming these to power struggles, how to put two different ways of working together, and also we were facing the hierarchies of the learning outcomes and the aims. In the educational academic institution, we were having struggles. What are the ways really then learning, even if the schools who wanted to work with them were willing to come and join, then still there was lots of hesitance. Then, is this okay? Is this taking too much time? Will it give enough academic results? How majority of the artist-teacher pairings work together was by language teacher giving the dance artist vocabulary and grammatical task for the upcoming lesson. The dance artist then tried to find a way to create creative means of teaching the material by using elements of movement, dance, rhythm, and relaxation. During the lessons, the language teachers were participating in the class alongside the students, taking the role of a discipliner when needed. Like you were seeing from the video, teacher was one of the students there amongst the others, but not taking active role as a teacher in the situation. The artists were doing excellent work. The language teachers reported that especially vocabulary was learned well during these talk lessons. This was measured by oral exams. Most of the teachers were pleased with their role during the lessons. It gave them time and opportunity to observe the students in a new way than they normally were able to do when they were in the role of the teacher themselves. To their surprise, they noticed that students who were inactive in the traditional classroom environment were actively taking part during talk lessons, and sometimes vice versa. Teachers also reported about the positive effects the lessons had on grouping and bonding with students and social skills of the students. A few teachers also mentioned that it was easier to teach students after talk lessons. Students were more cooperative with their own teacher in their normal class setup too. Creating the online video guide was a turning point in our process. The dance artists working on the project had been awarded with a different sized grants by Kone Foundation, and the majority of them finished their work in the project after finishing the video. However, a few artists were able to carry on their work, and a new goal was created for them. Even though majority of teachers had been pleased with the cooperation with artists, the artists themselves felt tired of constant developmental work they felt was often one-sided from their part. Because of this, new goal became to find more artistically inspiring ways to work at schools, to look if there were really opportunities to use artistic process at school. Two of the artists started to work together as a team. Before that, they had all been working as a couple with a teacher. And furthermore, instead of visiting the schools, the artists now settled in the schools as resident artists. It's quite obvious that it's good for you to have a co-worker to work with you, but I wanted to point this out because often we can't find the funding to send two teachers for the institutions or to schools to work together. So that's why I want to have a couple words of the benefits of this. Working as a team enabled better ground for planning of lessons with the students, and it also improved fluency of the lessons. Artists learned new ways of working and found it useful to be able to self-reflect by having the other person there. By mirroring their strategies against each other and using instant reflection while working, they were able to identify their own strengths and weaknesses and develop complementing ways of working. It also helped finding solutions to problems they had earlier experienced when working alone. Working as a team, the artists felt calmer about and increased their enthusiasm for their work. The residence-based approach gave the artist an opportunity to start a more coherent artistic process with students. Having more time to spend in the school environment, it was possible to identify school-specific needs and create tailored process to address them. For example, when working with students from immigrant background, the starting point wasn't learning vocabulary or grammatical structures, but to acknowledging them as individuals. By this I mean that the students were encouraged to use their mother tongue and share aspects of their culture they considered important for them. By doing so, students were after a while more open to learning the Finnish language and culture as well. When the talk project started, the focus had been on finding new ways to teach vocabulary and grammatical structures. Now it was to create situations where there was a natural need and motivation to use the different language that was being learned. The artists were creating spaces for interactions where more responsibility and authority was given to students, making them feel ownership for the language. The cooperation with teachers in this new phase of the project was also different. The teacher took a bigger role as a developer of her own teaching methods. The teacher created links between the artistic work and language learning and started implementing them in the process of oral and written language lessons. And by having sessions and by having exchange of experiences and information between the artist and the teacher. So the other words, they kind of changed the role. Like in the first phase, the artist was the one who was creating the new ways of teaching, and now they changed the roles the other way around. And the teacher was taking the material, what they were doing in the artistic process, and then putting it into the classroom action. So based on the experience of this project, so far the artistic process was successfully implemented during the second phase of the project. To be honest, there are still challenges with the strict timetable system at school, but as the artists were having the residency at school, they were able to find the creative solutions for that. There's lots of potential, but it still needs lots of change to happen, even though we're talking about the change is the maybe not so politically correct way of talking. But one way would be to start from teacher training. And in the way it's happening already, like when we have started this work from 2007, the school, the ideas in the school were quite different, and it has been now changing more and being open to use process work at schools. But still on a practical level, it needs, for example, lots of training for those teachers who have been teaching in a very different way all these years. And that's where the artists have lots to keep for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to ask all three speakers to come up, and we'll take the questions and open up a discussion. Please. Come up. Yes. While I let the audience ponder, I'd like to ask from Alan, I would like to ask from you, you encouraged us to reflect upon what it would be like if the arts were part of the everyday fabric of one's life. And yesterday afternoon, you weren't here at that point when in yesterday afternoon we discussed about the importance of strangeness and otherness and outsiderness of art and its power to create interference and disruption that are central for artistic interventions in organizations. Could you reflect upon that a bit? How to bring the arts in the everyday fabric, yet maintain the strangeness or otherness that has the power to interfere or stir thinking?
Maybe if I give two examples, because I agree with that. Absolutely. In health, I think in Canada, going back to the 90s, we talked about the third dynamic of bringing someone in from outside. So it's in transprofessional dialogue. You bring someone in and they allow a situation that might be locked to free up. And I think there's a parallel with what artists and art pedagogues do. They bring something new into that space that allows the situation to change. But if I give two examples of what I meant by it, I agree with that strangeness and otherness and the third dynamic. But when I was writing that speech under the clock in Liverpool, or the first thinking about it, it was a big concourse, and there's a Costa coffee, and people are coming off the trains. And on the next to me was a man in his sort of 23, and there was a woman in, I guess, in her sort of 50s. I'm obsessed with age, aren't I? You can tell. And he said, "Hey, what, you're going to come and you're going to see the Giants? They're here on the 4th and 7th of October." She went, "Of course I am. Yeah, I'll be there." Now, in Liverpool, there's a lot of talk of football, and you usually say, "You're going to go watch the Reds, or you're going to watch the Blues." You talk of the football. The Giants are the French company who've seen their work, who produce these incredibly large puppets that are operated mechanically. They've been to Liverpool. They first came when we were the capital of culture. And I think the turnout was nearly 300,000 people came to watch them. They've been back subsequently once, and they're coming again in October. Now, to me, that part of the everyday fabric was, wow, somebody's just saying, are you going to come and see this? That intervention on a huge scale in the city with a story of a girl looking for a father as she's wandering through the city streets, being moved around, is a really sort of key example of what I mean by it's just an ordinary part of the fabric. And just let me give you one more trans-professional example. I was at a meeting with Northwest Health, that group we were talking about a little while ago, and when we were planning the first session for the day for this reconceptualization of mental health. Where do we start with this? And one of the health professionals just said, okay, which graphic facilitator should we get? So a graphic facilitator is someone who, you know, is recording visually what's going on in the room. And there are all sorts of graphic facilitation and different levels of that. Documentation, reflecting back to other people. But I thought, again, that was part of the fabric of daily life. It wasn't, hey, have you heard you could get someone? It was just like, yeah, which graphic facilitator should we get? It was part of how they were thinking. That wouldn't have happened a while ago. So these very small examples of one in a professional setting and one outside are what I mean by that it has that sort of woven into the fabric in some way.
Thank you. That refers to something that Giovanni Sciuma talks about in his book on arts and business, where he sort of suggests that the ultimate goal for introducing arts in organizations is to get the arts, the logic of the arts in the very DNA of the organization, so that it is part of the everyday decision making at every levels in the organization. So it's not something sort of a once off. Yeah. Good. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Hello, my name is Kirsi Monni. I'm asking you, Hanna, about the Flora project. Could you say some examples of what kind of pedagogical innovations or approaches you had there? Because you said that in the Flora project there wasn't this kind of testing of musicality as it is in traditional music schools, which is a very much heritage of classical music tradition. So could you say something about this? Because what I learned from Talk project from Katja Kirsi, it was really profoundly a kind of pedagogical innovation project also, as it was a kind of, well, I said it already. Thanks.
If this works, yes. What a clever question, thank you. Because I was thinking the same while your presentation. The point of Flora, to be honest, has been about accessibility. And in some way, I think teachers in the institutions have been extremely brave, because they have wanted to show that things are not about question of testifying extra talented musical children beforehand, and it's not question about to whom they teach those things. I think they are so, in some way, what is rohkea? Brave enough to not to change their pedagogies. They think that it's only question that to whom they can give their pedagogy. Mostly it's about classical music, but there is also quite many from pop and jazz musicians. And to be honest, I will be extremely excited to start my interviews in November, because it's so big, this scale around teachers who have been involved in Flora project. All sort of pedagogues have been there, classical musicians, pop jazz musicians. I think there is coming next generation in that field, but it's not about pedagogies, to be honest. It's all about, well, social justice in music education, in institutions.
Thank you all for your presentations. They were great. Alan, I just want to pick up on what you were commenting on just a moment ago, and draw us back to the issue of the hierarchy in the arts, because I think we've almost got a sense sometimes that, oh, well, if creativity and the arts are being valued in these new places, that's just all of them. But I think it's quite different, because if we took your example of being in that corporation, where can we get this graphic illustrator? If someone at the table had turned and said, where can we get the interpretive dancer for this meeting? That would be just kind of way out there and unexpected and just completely almost infeasible as a concept at this point in history. And yet, if we really look at it, we say, well, yeah, actually, that could be just as valid a form of achieving what the graphic illustrator would do. But there's like a second revolution then that has to happen there, not just a valuing of creativity in the arts, but a valuing of all of these very diverse ways, because it's very easy for us to sort of switch from writing to drawing, or from a visual form, which everyone can feel comfortable about, to an embodied form, which is going to disrupt all sorts of expectations of behavior. And this maybe comes back especially to Zodiac and what you're doing in doing that same thing of how do we take that second revolution of not just getting creativity and innovation and artists in the space, but these very different types of artists.
Yeah, that made me think what I've been talking with the teachers, and it's interesting because they've started thinking how to evaluate the embodied work we are doing. And it's quite interesting idea because many of them were saying, okay, I can't test this by these standard exams, so that we should actually develop embodied tests to to test what you've been doing. So there's still, I mean, this is part of the power struggle there to like try to put it in their own lockers. In a way, it's also quite nice idea that they are opening up for embodiment, but then not seeing the link between how it can help you in your life in general and in your academic skills. And what they recognize there easily is that it's empowering the students and giving them social skills for being active, socially active with each other, being polite, having empathy.
Thanks for the question, Nick. I think as well, we're back to terminology, because I think there are hybrid artists developing. So you could look at graphic facilitators being very instrumental and documenting. But now there's an international association started in the States, but spread internationally. And the work that the top graphic illustrators do, I would say, is a developing art form. It's got all those qualities of they're not quite knowing what they're doing as they're beginning to document. And they negotiate the frame of engagement with the people they're working with. And if they negotiate at the level about how we're talking, they can set the frame up whereby they are the voice that speaks to the power in the room, because they're outside again, there's this third dynamic coming in. And I'm thinking of one particular in Finland, Raquel Bammargui, who's got a dramaturgical background but has shifted into the visual. It seems to me she combines in her work amazing artistic, all levels. And she's working in context, social, community context, but also CEO level, governmental level, where people are in very complex situations and they don't quite know what to do. So to have an artist in the room who's listening, thinking, responding, moving, the room turns to them saying, would you say what you're seeing? She can go back to a small moment in the discussion and she can offer it back. And in terms of art, if art's not about selection and focus and offering back and open up in a dialogue, I think that's a real high level of art. So I take your point absolutely about the instrumental nature of it, but I think interesting hybrids are developing in that sense.
Actually, I was thinking still, I think traditional Western classical music teachers in music institutions in some way, I can see we've been jealous to you because we haven't had tools to do something in our contemporary society, because our skills have been traditionally quite much focused to traditional music education. So I think in some way I've been thinking that those Flora teachers have been pretty much revolutionary, because it's the first step to try to do something that it's more, I think, easygoing in theater, in drama, in dance. So I think that's the point now, that it's not yet so much about pedagogy, but it's more that how traditional classical music educators can do something, and that's the first thing to try to open up doors and windows to diverse students.
It's not so much a question as an offering of some information. Two models that I'm thinking about as we think about education and pedagogy that integrates arts-based approaches. There was a program in South Africa called EduDance that was in hundreds and hundreds of schools across the country for about 10 years. And they integrated dance-based teaching into all subjects in elementary schools. And I just suggest that as one model that has existed and was very successful until cutbacks forced it to close. The other is the work of Arnie April in Chicago, whose work some of you may know already. And in that model, all subjects are taught with artistic approaches. And the model there is that teachers work with individual artists for a full year, developing curriculum and pedagogical approaches together before they go into the classroom. So they're not inventing things on the run, but rather they do experimentation and reflection before they go into the classroom, and then it further develops with the students. So just Arnie April's work in Chicago and EduDance in South Africa, both really excellent models if you're looking at reinventing or inventing the wheel.
Thank you very much. The various discussions have led me to think about again, the training of the future artists and practitioners and teachers in different fields. Now, there is probably a great danger always that we start to think of just adding more and more layers on teachers or on artists, like adding more skills. And I just wanted to ask you what you think. What are we willing to give up? What can we put aside to give space for new thinking and revolutionary ideas and new pedagogy?
I think so. If we're artists and art pedagogues, then coming back to the issue of practice within it and the thing that we have special that we can offer. Because we have skills and techniques that could be in, if I'd call it like the transferability debate. So I'm going back a bit back to what you were saying, Judith. Is if pedagogues, and I've been involved in the training of teachers again for a long time, of drama teachers in the UK. The OECD, when you read all of their literature, it's very much about using the arts for transferable skills and knowledge. How can we use the arts so that you can learn a language better? How can we use it so you can engage with science better? Which is really valuable, and I also engage with it. It's really useful. And there are a set of skills that we could bring in there. But there's a danger that we lose, I think, the very core of what we do as artists and arts pedagogues, which is the things I was trying to talk about in the presentation, which is a concern for the human and the way we're functioning and the way, if education, again, is about communication of knowledge, and in the UK, where it's such a stage of instrumentalism in terms of what we're measured on and what we're accountable for, that if we go along with that transferability notion and start teaching all of our teachers, yes, use the arts to do this, and I've done it on our programme. We've tried it in different forms. Teacher as artist, what does that mean? Teacher as performer, what does that mean? Here are some of the skills in communication. Here are some techniques you can use in various ways. And I think it's really important, but it does take more time. And what's the balance? I don't know the answer to it in terms of keeping our core purpose of the work we're doing to answer the questions of significance to young people as human beings. So there's still that place for the arts within the curriculum, say, in schools, if we're talking about mainstream education.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I have to say that we have to be careful about being like polarization the ideas, because the same artist, like I'm looking Jenny here, who was part of the talk project, can at the same time being a real artist doing performances into the black box and being taken very seriously, and at the same time can go to the schools and research and think about these ideas. How can I use my professionalism? How can I use movement as a tool? And it doesn't need to be threatening to each other. Because what then very often tends to be like, okay, yeah, I want to do my art. I don't want to be put to be as a pedagogy or a therapist or a doctor or whatever, social worker. They don't have to, you can take separate different roles. And what I think it's important, why I can say this proudly, is because in Zodiac, the main idea there behind is that we are doing it with the artists who are willing to work like this, who is interested about the society, who is interested to going to the other spaces, to other situations. Then I think it's horrible if the all funding goes in the art for that it needs to be beneficial, it has to be useful somehow. Then we are in a danger. But I think behind there needs to be strong, lively art form that is creating performances, doing its main task there. And from that point of on, you can nourish, the artist can nourish themselves and go to the society and have something to give.
That's a good place to come to a conclusion, because it's time for us to have a lunch and get ourselves nourished. Also, in that sense, although all these ideas have probably nourished us more than the school lunch here. Yes, we'll continue 12:30, and Katja Kirsi will be moderating the afternoon session.
And I have to ask, are the people who will be talking in the afternoon session, if you are here already, please come to me before the lunch. I want to have a little chat with you.
And that will be the
Suomeksi, ne, jotka pitävät iltapäivän puhetta, tulkaa käymään mun luona. Mä haluaisin tavata teidät vielä ennen iltapäivän sessiota.
And please do remember that we have the Learning Wine Bar tonight, which will be great fun. And after that, please join us for the wine bar and then for the film showing in the evening. Thank you.